Argument 1. I'm going after a 22-year-old message board post. 2. I've actually met Matt Fraction and Kelly Sue DeConnick in real life. They're nice, warm, understanding people. They are not at all like how they come off online. Though at this point, after all these decades, how they come off online is kind of on them. Part the third. Yes, I'm doing this because he's in a weakened public position. Part the fourth. I experienced a catastrophic life event this past May. And one of the things that came out of that event was if I didn't say what I really felt about this forum post, even after 22 years, whatever rotten thing had been growing inside of me was part of that. And I needed to get it out. And he's in a weakened enough position that I can get away with it. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the full message board forum post. Then I'm going to read it with my commentary. On June 25th, 2002, at 12:18 p.m., Warren Ellis Forum posted this. Sometimes I wonder where you all went. You complain about the lack of range and material in your comic stores. You complain about not having nothing original to read and how bad Marvel are and how dull DC is and how it's a shame that no one supports the indie work and how it's a shame that Dark Horse has let its original comics bleed off and how rotten your retailers are and how fucked the distribution system is and how stultifying the retro movement is and. This is called literally from 1 minute's worth of reading time in last week's review thread. Peter Parker, Daredevil, Thunderbolts, Ultimate Spider-Man, New X-Men, Ultimate X-Men, Micronauts, Wonder Woman, JSA, Black Widow, Batgirl. Micronauts. 2 years ago, Micronauts was a fucking punchline. This is what you wanted. You didn't want new ideas. You didn't want new stories. All it took was some well-known creators putting on pervert suits and a couple of old toys, and all the rhetoric of 2000 and 2001 went away. My bet is that literally thousands of the people who see this post this week have read Come On Alone in one form or another. But you know you've done it. You're probably the biggest weekly sampling of weekly comics purchase habits on the web. You are the test group. And this is what you want. Peter Parker, Batgirl, Micronauts. And you send the message that puts Huddleston and Nixie on Batgirl and Rick Vitch on Aquaman and all those other things you manage to look askance at while you have a copy of Thunderbolts rolled up in your back pocket. Enjoy. I'm going to say this again. Warren Ellis was telling this to his own readers, his own fan base. Now I'm going to read it again with commentary. Sometimes I wonder where you all went. You complain about the lack of range material in your comic stores. You complain about how nothing original read, how bad Marvel are, and how dull DC is, and how it's a shame that no one supports the indie work, and how it's a shame that Dark Horse has let its original comics bleed off, and how rotten your retailers are, and how fucked the distribution system is. Actually, the fun part of the Warren Ellis Forum was retailers and distribution. Every time there was a discussion of how bad comics retailing and stores were. Now, I happen to be lucky that I've never had any problem with any comic book store I've gone into, but I read a lot of bad stories. A lot of bad stories that were on this forum. They were all kind of like ignored, pushed to the side because guys like Rory Rood or Brian Hibbs were in there, and people kind of just said, "Oh well," because I think the real reason was like it was much easier to go after the readers than it was to go after the people that were caught. Who I think and still think were causing the major problems. And how stultifying the retro movement is. I'm gonna do my favorite memory of the Warren Ellis. One of my favorite memories of the Warren Ellis Forum of a creator being a person that Dan Curtis Johnson, if you remember him. I remember somebody saying like, "Oh well, the Transformers series," which that Transformers series by Pat Lee and the Dreamwave Transformers series were bad comics. I'm not going to deny that. At least that's getting people into stores. And then Dan Curtis Johnson would tell this story of how someone at his job would accompany him into the store, buy an issue of Transformers, and walk right out. And I think that was Dan's argument that no, these things aren't getting people into stores and buying comics. And I always thought, like, well, Pat Lee did more to get people into a comic store than Dan Curtis Johnson ever did. And that's why I'm glad Dan Curtis Johnson doesn't work in comics anymore. This is culled from literally 1 minute's worth of reading on time on last week's review thread. I'm going to go through these titles. Peter Parker. Now, I'm going to say something. One of the ironclad rules of the War in Ellis form that was never the creator's fault. The creators were horrible slaves to the system. The creators couldn't, they shouldn't, but they must. You know, you weren't allowed to criticize creators on the forum. Well, he was, but he did it in a very passive-aggressive, not really way. You know, you wouldn't find, you were supposed to kiss Craig Rucka's ass or Brett Brubaker's ass, no matter what they were actually doing. But he did have this kind of like two-faced, like I remember somebody said Mackie the Monster. And Howard Mackey's one of the worst writers of Spider-Man of all time. Now, Mackie the Monster is a silly thing to say, but I remember Ellis getting all like, do you know him personally? I mean, he wasn't, like, again, if you think superhero comics are as bad and corrosive as they are, you have to put that on the people that make them. That's how it works. And if you don't want to be off their Christmas card list, then shut the fuck up. But let's go through these titles. Peter Parker, written by Paul Jenkins, back then considered a pretty good writer. Daredevil, again, Bendis, a creator that Ellis talked up mightily during the old days, and in fact had guest star in one of his, and Bendis had Ellis guest star in an issue of Powers. Thunderbolts. Thunderbolts was a genuinely good title back then. That was still Fabian Nicieza writing. And the next, and then he left the title because his editor was an idiot. And then he came back and wrote it again and was quite entertaining. And who took over Thunderbolts after Fabian Nicieza left? I can't remember. I just can't. I just remember he totally misunderstood what Fabian Nicieza was doing with Songbird and turned her into a slut. Because he's such a big feminist, you know. Ultimate Spider-Man. Again, Bendis Bagley. Creators people liked. I'm sorry people liked them. I'm sorry people wanted to support those creators. You can't, like, say creators are suffering and then say don't buy their books. It doesn't work that way. New X-Men. Sometimes my friends fuck ugly mates. Ultimate X-Men. Sometimes my friends fuck ugly girls. That's literally his response to that. Grant and I agree to disagree. Micronauts. Well, this is the one that's making me mad because Scott Worrell, the man who was writing Micronauts at that time, had been on the forum for a fucking month, promoting and asking people to give it a shot. You didn't yell at him. You didn't kick him off the forum. You let him stay there as long as he wanted. Nobody else from Devil's Due showed up on this forum. But you did. You let him fuck around. And he was building an audience. They were buying it because he was a nice guy and they thought he'd give it a shot and support him. Now, Scott Worrell was fired off Micronauts after 5 issues. His arc was fine. I guess it just didn't do what Josh Blaylock wanted. He later wound up working for Shadowline, and now he's not doing any comics at all. I wonder why. Wonder Woman. I think this was Phil Jimenez, which was a guy I think you were a fan of, Warren. JSA, well, no excuse for that. Black Widow, at that time, another Rucka toy. I thought Rucka was one of the greatest creators of all time. If you pay attention to the Warren Ellis Forum, you know, that great feminist creator who, you know, whose female characters are all self-loathing drunks who can never ever take care of themselves. Batgirl, well, yeah, I can't really excuse Batgirl, but fuck you anyway. Micronauts. 2 years ago, Micronauts was a fucking punchline. Again, you let the guy on the forum to promote the fucking thing. That's on you. And 2 years ago, Micronauts was not a fucking punchline. 4 years ago, Micronauts was a fucking punchline. When Marvel's revival of Micronauts with Sean Burry and Carrie Nord did not go forward. This is what you wanted. You didn't want new ideas. You didn't want new stories. All it took was some well-known creators putting on pervert suits and a couple of old toys, and the rhetoric of 2000, 2001 went away. I don't know what to fucking tell you, man. I bought whatever I wanted to fucking buy. I bought a lot of indie books back then. I buy hardly any indie books right now. By now, because none of them are good. Not a lot of them are good. Which isn't to say any of the Marvel and DC stuff is good. I think Transformers is one of the best books on the market right now. And that's a problem. But it's not a problem I can solve by not buying Transformers. Or buying Transformers. It's not. Here's the thing: the Warren Ellis Forum created this mentality that it was all on the readers. And if you don't believe that, you think about the rhetoric that's been coming out of YouTubers today. You think about how guys like Wes from Thinking Critical and your boy Zack, even Comics by Perch, they flipped it, that it's all on the creators, it's all on them. It's all on, they're the ones doing the wrong things. And it used to be us. And it was, in its own way, what Ellis was doing was eliminationist rhetoric. Because he didn't really have a solution for anything except continuing anger and humiliation of the people that were willing to listen to him. Because if he had a solution, then he had nobody to feel superior to. And yeah, like a lot of people on that board were angry, like guys like Fraction, and Kelly DeConnick, Charlie Chu, Jamie Rich is in this thread. And you know what Jamie Rich did this year? He launched a $300,000 copy revival of the Teenage fucking Mutant Ninja Turtles. No one put his gun to his head and made him do that. No one put a gun. Now, Jamie Rich left IDW not long after that. But no one put a gun to Jamie Rich's head and made him sell 300,000 copies. He took IDW's money. That was on him. My bet is that literally thousands of people who see this post this week have read Come In Alone in one form or another. I wish I hadn't read that. Because for years I bought into its line that, like, if you don't buy the art that Warren Ellis approves of, there's something wrong with you, there's something sick with you, there's something wrong with your social skills. No. My problems were my problems is all isolated to my behavior. It had nothing to do with the art I consume. I mean, there are a lot of guys even worse on this. Like Pat Mills was psychotic. Like there are passages of martial law that are genuinely psychotic, but at least Mills knew when to stop with martial law. Garth Ennis has completely lost his fucking mind. He spent 6 years of his working life and 4 years of Derek Robertson's talent pissed away on his on like The Boys, which is, and then to top it all off, he had no moral problem selling the damn thing to Amazon. I don't get it. I don't get it. When does this change anything? When does this fix anything? Your boy Zack has 96,000 subscribers. 96,000. How many comics sell 96,000 copies a month? You know who else I thought read? Who else I thought read Coming Alone? Guys like Darwin Cook, Brad Meltzer, and all these deranged freaks that seem to come out of the woodwork after the forum went down when you weren't looking, Warren, that seemed to like want to change continuity for the better and do shit like, well, they were all fighting lobotomized retards. So that's what was really going on during the Silver Age. That's why those stories suck. That is literally the premise of Identity Crisis. And Brad Meltzer is a man who has made more money and had more mainstream recognition than Warren Ellis will ever have in his life. And yet, he was so anxious and depressed and bent in his head about the fact that he used to read comics. He read a lot of stupid comics as a kid that he created Identity Crisis. And I can't think of who did this to him. A lot of people were reading this forum. One of the few truly smart things Heidi MacDonald has ever said is it was the town square of comics. I'm going to get to that in a minute. Because it's like he says, you've done it. You are probably the biggest weekly sampling of weekly comics purchase happens on the web. You're the test group and this is what you want. First of all, fucko, I didn't consent to being part of a test group. No one in this forum consented to be a part of a test group. That was not our job, and you know it. We were here to talk about comics. There were a lot of smart, good people on this forum. And yet you couldn't get them to behave exactly the way you wanted them to. And I mean exactly. I mean, guys like Matt kissed your ass all day and it still wasn't enough for you. And Matt, that's how you were. The Matt Fraction I knew on this forum, the Kelly Sue DeConnick I knew on this forum, would have rather slit their fucking throat than have the word Iron Man or Captain Marvel, words Iron Man or Captain Marvel on their resumes. And that made me, and Captain Marvel made $1 billion, and all you got out of it, Kelly Sue, was an extra, was probably a day rate for being an extra. Who's the fool? And yet, the readers were the problem. Peter Parker, Batgirl, Micronauts. Again, if you didn't want people buying Micronauts, you shouldn't have let Scott whirl on the forum. Fuck off. And you send the message to Huddleston Nixie on Batgirl. How long did that last? Riddikovich on Aquaman. That was his decision. That was 12 issues. It's never even being fully collected, so who cares? And all the other things you somehow so look askance at while you have the copy of Thunderbolts, 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 rolled up in your back pocket. Enjoy. Enjoy what? You yelling at me? You yelling at all your damn readers? You see, this bullying was okay when it was all seen as for some sort of greater good. Now again, I know for a fact that Matt Fraction and Kelly Sue DeConnick are nice people. But I remember there was this column that Matt Fraction wrote where he said the deep, dark secret of comics is that nobody cares about them. And I could never get past that feeling that I was being devalued. Because I was going to my store every week. I was supporting the creators I wanted to support. I was reading the books I was enjoying. But that wasn't enough. I wasn't the right kind of comics fan. Apparently, I didn't care. Now I know what. Now, Matt, before you start, I know what you're trying to say in that column. That's not what I've heard. There is this palpable sense on the Warren Ellis forum that if we could just get rid of the people that were going in the stores now, then we could get the right people in the stores and buy the right books and have the right kind of industry you wanted. Well, that's not how it works, pal. Because those new fans, they see you yelling at the old fans, and it all falls apart because who wants to join that club? I couldn't believe the fact that Kurt Busiek. I looked over this. There weren't a lot of people yelling, snapping back at him in this forum. Not that I expected a lot of people to in this, but it ran for 1,000 posts before he finally shut it down. But it always kind of bothered me that like there were regular people there, like Kurt Busiek was a regular. Mark Waid was a regular. Now I can buy Mark Waid, and I'm like Kurt Busiek, not saying, "Hey man, why don't you stop fucking yelling at your own audience?" That's the mentality the Warren Ellis and the forum created. That's the truth. That was what backfired. That's when it went wrong. You turn the audience into the enemy, an enemy to be fought, a nuisance to be cowed into submission. This is why we have guys like, this is why we have Dan Slott screaming pixels at a screen. This is why Kelly Sue DeConnick can say, if you don't like my politics, don't buy my book in the most obnoxious, sarcastic manner possible. And she's surprised when people take her up on that. This is why, like, your boy Zack has gotten away with it for 7 years. But now it's flipped. Now guys like Wes and Perch and Zack think the creators are the enemy, that's not fair either. That's not what I want. A lot of creators I don't like as people or creators. I'm not going to buy a Mark Waid comic for the rest of my life. And in terms of guys if I had the Infinity Gauntlet snap out of existence, Warren Ellis is low on the list, and Evan Dorkin is number one. But I know that war is not the answer in this case, because war has been going on for 20 years. This attitude infected the entire industry, that it was all on us, that it was our problem, that it was our tastes that were killing the industry and making things not work and making everyone miserable. And there was a whole other host of problems going on. And I know this isn't going to change anytime soon. I mean, the fact that people still hire Steve Wacker to edit comic books is proof of that. But this is where ComicsGate really started. It's in this contempt, this need to take out your frustrations on the people who fucking put the money in your pocket. I mean, for God's sakes, man, less than 2 years after this post, Warren Ellis was the regular writer for a year on Ultimate Fantastic Four. 4 years after this that Christmas, he was on Iron Man for 6 issues and ruined the character, but that's a story for another time. 5 years after this post, he limped through a year on Thunderbolts. Remember the Year of Whoredom? It was the decade. Decades. What do people know Warren Ellis for outside of comics? Castlevania on Netflix. What's the message here? What do you want? What do I want? What, this is what you want? Well, what do you want? Who are we even fighting anymore? I don't like ComicsGate at all. I find your boy Zack's behavior psychotic. I find Wes to be a passive aggressive little simp. A passive aggressive. No, a simp isn't like the word. Like, little shit's a good word. And even though he could probably beat the hell out of me, he'd actually have to get off. I love when Wes is like, your comics are terrible. You're not as angry, but the problem is you're not angry enough. I don't know, man. I'm angry about the way comics have gone, but but you know what? Getting angry isn't solving the problem. I mean, you're angry. Why don't you get off your little rat hole in the Philippines, fly to a convention, and start yelling at these people? I mean, don't. And if you're angry, like, is this anger going to make the mass in my lung go away, shrink? No. I mean, yes, I can be angry about comics, but can't be angry about comics all the time. Apparently you can, and even though you have 3 small children. And then there's Perch. And then there's Perch. Then there's Perch. But I'll let Perch hang himself with his own words. So here I am on a Monday night in a house that's not my own, yelling about a 22-year-old message board post. But we've got to just get beyond this parasocial bullshit and learn to live with each other. Warren Ellis didn't have the answer 22 years ago. ComicsGate doesn't have the answer now. I'm not willing to like shove everybody out of comics because they'd inconvenience me. And I do think, based on, if I have one more thing to say about Warren Ellis is, if I truly were a friend of Mark Grunwald, as he claimed he was after Grunwald's death, I wouldn't have written Secret Avengers 21. And everybody associated with that comic should have been fired from Marvel permanently. Out of a cannon into a brick wall. It's not fun to let anger out. I'm going to read a quote from that original from those threads. I would have thought it totally obvious, at least to most anyone not habitually freaking this word, there are droves of sycophants who talk the talk but don't walk the walk. And why not? Have you not expertly cultivated a personality cult so completely that superhero fans will swear up and down they're going to start buying Strange Haven or whatnot, all the while wanking over copies of Young Justice while that important bit of creator work rots on the vine? You want accurate information, quit tainting your control group by making them so eager to please you. And then there's another quote that I thought was, there was a time when Stormwatch was pretty much a punchline as well. Micronauts has one issue out so far. Who says it won't turn into something worth reading? After all one's said and it's done, Stormwatch was pretty darn good after you took it over. So is DV8 for that matter under you. Planetary and Transmet are good reading. No, they're not. And I think it's time we confronted the fact that John Cassidy is gone and a good chunk of his time was wasted by a really, really poor fanfic version of the Wold Newton universe, which is what Planetary is I'm not sugarcoating that anymore. It's something we all know, but it's just the Wool Newton universe. Only they beat up Marvel, who at the time was I could record a whole video about Ellis's weird relationship with Marvel, but maybe I'll do that some other time. I'm sure Mech will be. This is getting tiresome. We know you'd prefer seemingly nothing but original word stick to the icons and create something new. No singles. TPOGNs all the way. And hey, I agree somewhat. You people you know professional, people you know personally are creating something new. So it's out there for us to read at artbomb.net, one of the best graphic ideas for the medium of all time. It's doing wonders and it's still infant. But hey, some people might like Lord of the Rings, X-Men, Spider-Man, or I'm a hunk of geek you can shake your finger at. This doesn't make them bad, evil, or stupid. I think on some level Willis knew this. I think on some level Garth Ennis believes it. Not everyone loves HK Cinema either. It doesn't make you stupid. I don't know if any form that totally buys old. I pick up Bendis Daredevil and I picked up his previous run and Max run and Smith's run, but I don't pick a single issue of Gale's run because I wasn't a writer I cared for. I pick up Planetary, dude. I pick up Kabuki, Hellboy, Powers, The Filth, and Channel Zero is one of the best comics hits shelves in a very long, long time. Yeah, it was pretty good. This has zero to do with you or the form, but because as you got to know, I'm not a drone. I don't nod my head with every Ellis degree. Here's a couple fun little anecdotes with you. You become what you hate. You are a source of fandom. Have you noticed the behavior of some forumites? It reminds me of those kids in Galaxy Quest going up to Tim Allen's character to ask about technical details of the ship from the TV show. Do you ever get the feeling the reason why people are falling in line with you is it's the cool thing to do around here? No matter how sound your reasoning is, the human being's fear of rejection is, I'm guessing here, a bit stronger. That's the problem. This isn't working. And it started with him. I'm going back to Wes for a bit. It started with Warren. Go back to Wes for a bit. Now, what Warren Ellis was accused of doing, as far as I can tell, based on what I've read, was that he was being cruel and bullying to women he was friends with. He had paid for companionship, and it was hurting a lot of them. And there is actually a person he may have targeted. And his original response that I didn't realize I was that famous was so insanely stupid. But like the idea of his bullying back then was seeing he's trying to create a greater good. But when he got outed by so many of us, it was clear he was a bully because it was fun for him. And guys like Wes from Thinking Critical, who, to be fair, started reading comics long after Warren Ellis was considered a hero, long after Warren Ellis was considered God, can say something utterly ridiculous like a man and a woman having mutual consensual sex is creepier than anything Warren Ellis did in a fictional comic book because one of the women was human trafficked. He can say something that stupid. If there's one thing I want to impart to you guys, to ComicsGate, to people who just don't want bullshit in their face all day, Warren Ellis is not your friend. Warren Ellis made things worse. Warren Ellis should stay the fuck out of comics. Warren Ellis is the bad guy. And when I'm talking about the quality of his work, Transmet for the first year, i.e. when Stuart Moore had him on a leash. Orbiter, Dark Blue is terrific. I'm not saying don't read his work, though you shouldn't read Planetary because that comic is idiotic. Wolverine Not Dead Yet. Thunderbolts, ironically. Wolfskin. Although, let's face it, he was probably just writing down notes from Mike Wolfer, and Mike Wolfer actually did the work on that book. You can read it as much as anyone else, but don't pretend he's your friend. Don't pretend he's a hero. Don't pretend he's a victim. Just don't. Comics don't need him, and you don't need him. And that's all I have to say. And I'm going to be at New York Comic Con on Thursday. So if you can catch me with my, and I have to mask up for health reasons. But if you catch me with the mask off, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have about this video. I know I'm going to regret this, and I'm probably going to take this down in a couple days. But it had to happen. Thank you.